Hello appraisers, this is Brandon with Spark for Appraisers, and I'm making this video to cover a question that we often get, which is why do I get wonky results sometimes? Why sometimes, for example, as you can see on my screen, do I get results that show a full bath adjustment might be $45,000 to $50,000 when I think it should be more like $10,000? So the question is, why does that happen? And how do I prevent it from happening? And how do I know that I can actually trust the results in Synapse when I see things like that? So let's go ahead and get into it. First, what you're looking at is this is the results screen in Synapse, and it is running 12 different features it's trying to get adjustment data for. Here, let's get rid of this. Now, some of these, I just loaded a bunch in here. These aren't necessarily all features I'm looking to get an adjustment for. However, you can see when you're looking at this screen, you have full bath, and you can see that I've got some results that look like they're up into the $45,000, $50,000 mark, even $55,000, when I'm expecting them to be down more where these are in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. So what's going on? Now, first of all, I have three different data sets that I've loaded into Synapse. I've got my first data set, which is properties that were the most similar to my subject, meaning they were so similar that they were the ones I was comfortable loading into my sales grid. And there were only maybe 10 sales here. So I'm not saying you should rely on a data set that small. It's okay in certain situations, but it's not ideal. Normally you want to have more competing properties. So that is the green data set here. These are my competing properties. These are all the properties in my defined neighborhood boundaries that I, the appraiser, decided were competing with my subject property. And then lastly, I have the orange data set, which is the entire neighborhood. So this would be all single family homes in my defined neighborhood boundaries. And you can see here when we were looking at full bath, the green dots, these are essentially results based on running a bunch of different math on different adjustment methods that appraisers can use on my competing set of data. Now, one of them is up high, but the majority of them are all down here where I would expect them to be. Again, these are my competing properties. Now, up here, the majority are based on the entire neighborhood set of data. They're the orange dots, and you can see those are the ones that are really high, with this one exception. So normally I would just say, yeah, I want to disregard those. Those aren't worth looking at. Just disregard them. So in Synapse, when you gray something out by moving this slider over it, that means you're telling Synapse, I am not placing any weight or consideration on those results. I'm going to base my decision on what the adjustment is based on the results down here. Now I've got, it looks like 3, 4, 5 different types of regression. I've got group data, and I've got paired sales, both the median and the average. And I'm disregarding everything else. And I also don't have any results in here, as you can see, that have blue dots. So those properties that were my sales grid, you might be wondering, why don't I have any blue dots here? And that's because all of those properties that were most similar to my subject property all had 2 full baths. So you can't calculate an adjustment on that. So there's no data in here for that. So that's something to be aware of as you're looking at this. You might be wondering, why don't I see more dots? And it could be because we just can't calculate any results on that data because it's all the same. And by the way, you can actually see that in Synapse by hovering over this little, we call it the exclude icon, calculations that were excluded. And if I scroll down here, let's just look at this ordinary least square regression on properties in my sales grid dataset. All properties were the same. So it tells you right there. And by the way, that also goes into your digital work file. So that's why there's no blue dots. So that's one reason why you might get funky results. It's because you're relying on data that isn't good for calculating that particular adjustment. So in this case, I know not to rely on the entire neighborhood in this particular market when it comes to a full bath adjustment. I just get wonky results. I'm not going to use them. So I can constrain those out or I can snip them out. Either way, they go into my work file, but I'm telling Synapse I'm not placing weight on them. I can hit that to take it back to how it was. And then the other thing that could impact the results are your settings. So your settings for how depreciated cost is calculated, your settings for how paired sales is calculated. In Synapse, you can go and tell it in the session settings. I can go to my depreciated cost settings, paired sales, but you can literally tell it, for example, with paired sales, what is a pair? Does a pair mean all the common areas have to be identical based on the MLS listing? If so, and you turn that on, you might significantly reduce the number of pairs, although you might also increase the accuracy of the results. So it's kind of a trade-off there of what's important, what is a typical buyer really going to consider. Also, when it comes to GLA, Does a property actually have to be literally the exact same GLA, or are you going to say plus or minus 3% or 5% or plus or minus 50 or 100 square feet? It's kind of up to you. All those settings are right here in the session settings, and you can go modify those, and those will impact your results. So just be aware of that, tweak them to what you think they should be and what a typical buyer might do in your market. And by the way, you can have different templates in Synapse as well. So if you want to have one template for higher end homes, because maybe the settings are different for that kind of buyer, or for rural properties or whatever, complex properties, then you can have a different template for that type of property. Okay, so settings impact it, the actual data you're using impacts it, and then one more thing that is a setting that impacts it that I want to show you, and that is the exclude results settings. So you can see right here, I am not getting any negative results at all. Now, most likely there are some negative results, but they're not being shown, and that is because I have chosen, when it comes to lot size and GLA, to exclude those. So let's go check it out. I've got my exclude results settings. And so this is me saying, okay, exclude negatives when it comes to basement size, basement finished area, baths full, baths half, all of this stuff. If I want to exclude negatives, because there never should be any in any realistic scenario, then you just check that box and Synapse will not show you those. You can also exclude, let's go to GLA. Let's say you think that there's never a time when I should ever have anything over, let's say $120 a square foot. Then that means Synapse will exclude any results over 120. Or if I have this unchecked, anything less than negative 120 will also be excluded. So only results from negative 120 to positive 120 will be shown. Or I can also make it a percentage, which is, I think, what I had it at. So it's 80% of the sale price. So just to give you an example of what that looks like, let's pull up the calculator here. So if I had a $300,000 property and they're typically about 2,000 square feet, that means they're selling for about $150 a square foot. So anything that's 80% of that or less will be shown. So anything that's $120 a square foot or less will be shown. Or if it's negative, the negative 120 as well. So anyways, that's how it works. You can go in here and tweak it so that way you just don't see any results that you think are ridiculous. They will go into your work file, just like I said before, so you'll be able to see in your work file any results that just didn't show up because you decided they shouldn't be there. And then here, if I go to full bath and I hover over this, you can see user excluded result. I didn't want to see any negative results for full bath, so this negative 6,700 based on group data is just simply not showing up on the screen. Does show up here though, so I can go and look at any excluded results. Okay, so that's it. We've got settings that cover what you see and how things are calculated. The data that you choose will impact it, and sometimes you want to use the neighborhood data set to calculate something else though. For example, I needed it to help me get a common area adjustment, but I did not want it or need it for the full bath, so I can just exclude it, just like that. Okay, so now we can move on to the last, but perhaps the most important and possibly the most complicated to explain reason for why you might get funky results. Now, I want to first clarify that all the results are accurate, mathematically accurate, based on your settings and the data you upload. If you get wonky results, it just means that either you're using data you shouldn't use, your settings are funky, or what we're about to talk about is there is covariance in the data, and that can cause you to get high results or really low results when you're not expecting that. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to bust open Excel here. And what I've done is this is all the raw data for the neighborhood file that I loaded into Synapse. It's the one that had the orange dots as the results. These are the 600 and something properties. And I went and modified it by breaking all this data down into just two columns. And that is full bath and sale price. I also did it for garage count. So two columns of data, garage count and sold price, and then GLA, which is GLA and sold price. So each one of these is just based on 2 points of data for every property. And I will like to clarify that that's also how it works with group data, regression, and sensitivity. It's all based on those 2 points of data. Now, paired sales isn't as impacted by what we're about to talk about, because paired sales has a lot more information about the property, because it's making sure that property is a match based on how you've defined your paired sales settings and what a match is, what a pair is. So while what I'm about to talk about does have a small impact on paired sales, it is minimal. So modeling won't change paired sales significantly in many situations. Group data regression and sensitivity should be significantly impacted by what I'm about to show you. Again, all of these are based on, in this GLA category right here, based on 2 points of data, the price and the GLA of every property. Over here, it's the price and the number of full baths in every property, and so on. Now let's go back to Excel. So let's go back to full bath. Here I've got all the data for number of full baths and sale price for all those 600 and something properties. I've got a scatter plot showing all of the properties. And so there's really 600 dots on this screen, which 600 data points. And you can see there's a couple with 1 bath, a couple with 4 bath, and everything else is either 2 or 3. Now, when I run ordinary least squares regression on this data, this is the result that I get, and it's this number before the X. $68,214 would be what ordinary least squares regression on this data is telling me to use. Now, I know that that number is stupid high and ridiculous to use in this particular market that I'm working in for this subject property. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the math. Everything's fine with the math. Everything's fine with the data I use. Now, maybe it's not a good set of data to use. That's something we could argue about. Maybe I need to use something else like we talked about before, just competing properties. But we also know that this result right here is because when you run regression on just these 2 points of data, then basically regression thinks, and I'm going to use, this is all loose, but I'm trying to hopefully make it make sense, is regression thinks that all the difference going from 1 to 2 baths is due to the number of baths that you went up. So in this case, we went up 1 full bath, and so it thinks that price difference from here to here is all due to that 1 bath, because that's what the sale prices told us for each of these. But that's not really the case, right? Because a lot of times when you go up from 1 to 2 baths, you're also probably on average going up to a bigger home, and maybe you're going up to a home or a property that is on a bigger lot. I'm sorry, a home that's on a bigger lot, or a property that has better views, maybe, or whatever it is, higher quality. Those are all things that we would say co-vary with the full bath count. So as full baths go up, so does GLA, or so does lot size, or whatever. So in the future in Synapse, we're planning on having a tool that will show you the things that co-vary with each other. But as the appraiser, you kind of already know this. And in general, the 2 items in most markets, not all, but most markets that have the biggest impact on that covariance, where it makes things look really funky, like the number's really high when they really shouldn't be that high, the 2 that have the biggest impact are lot size and GLA. So if we can get rid of or tease out the lot size and GLA from that full bath here, this $68,000 number from these sale prices, that should basically make this number much more accurate. So we can actually do that in Synapse, and we call it modeling, but really all it is it's adjusting all of those properties to the subject property. And let me show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and do it. So first of all, let's look at lot size. Now remember, paired sales is the one that's least impacted by the covariance problem. So let's go ahead and work on lot size, and we'll probably place more weight on paired sales. So I'm going to get rid of these. Now all these results, I believe, are just way too high to be reasonable. They're not accurate. I just am not going to place any weight on those. So I'm going to gray them out. I'm also going to sniff them out to kind of zoom in here. Now I'd say the same for anything that's down here below like $2, $1.50 somewhere, and that's just way too low to be reasonable. So I'm going to kind of place, and the same thing here, I'm going to kind of place all my weight on these results right here. Constrain these out, say they're not really reasonable results, and see what we have left. We've got a paired sales at 234, 4 different types of regression at 240, 250, sensitivity at 236, and another regression result, but based on my sales grid properties. Now remember, these are the ones that are most similar to my subject property So this might actually be a really good result to lean on when it comes to lot size. So I might go up here, and even though I've got 5 or is that 6 different results right around 240, 250, I might place more weight on the 352 and let's just call it $3. It's kind of in the middle, but we've got 1 on this side and 5 on this side. So I'm going to call it $3 and say done. I'm happy with that. Now I can go test that in my grid, load in that $3 adjustment, see if my comps adjust closer together. If they do, in general, that means it's probably a good adjustment to use. If they would adjust closer together at 250, then maybe I should use that instead. You can use that as like a guess and check against what you choose here. But I'm going to pick that $3 and I'm going to model it. So while I do this and while it's recalculating, I'm going to explain to you what's happening. So right now, what Synapse is doing is it's adjusting every single property's sale price to the subject property based on $2.50 a square foot for lot size, just like you do in your grid. So just like you make that lot size adjustment in your grid, you adjust all the properties to your subject based on, let's say $3. I think I said 250, but based on $3 a square foot, I'm doing that right here in Synapse. So for everything else, all the other features down here to the right and down of lot size, it has recalculated all of them based on the sale price after adjusting it to the subject property. So that's already done now. And you can see it has impacted the results. We still have some really high results in here for half bath and full bath, but let's go ahead and do GLA now. So let's look, let's constrain out all the stupid high numbers, sniff them out. Same thing with the ones that are really low. I find these two to be super low, so I'm gonna get rid of those. Now I've got, well here, let's go between, okay, so these results seem reasonable to me, somewhere between 40 and 80. I know that's a big range, but I'm gonna probably place more weight on depreciated cost because it seems to work really well in my market for giving me an accurate adjustment. So I might go right in the middle of that, call it 60 bucks. Depreciated cost is right at 60. And yeah, I'm happy with that. So I can call it $60, mark it done, and I'm going to model it. Now, again, remember, it's adjusting all the other features that have not been handled yet. It's adjusting them to the subject property now based on not just lot size at $3 a square foot, but GLA at $60 a square foot. And look at that. Now all those 30, 40, $50,000 bathroom results are way down here now. They're in the, I actually have quite a few that are in this reasonable range. Let's check it out. Yeah. So let's constrain out the stupid high one, get rid of that. And I can get rid of the super low one as well. Don't want to place any weight on those. And get rid of that. Okay, so this is what I'm left with. I've got paired sales results, which both have the highest error score, and so does this one regression result. You can tell because it has the black circle around it. Now, sometimes it's good, you may want to place more weight on the one with the lowest error score or the best error score. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to or you should. You can see in this case, this one had the best error score for regression, and I actually constrained it out as irrelevant because it's just way too high to be reasonable. Same with lot size. But in this case, these look like pretty reasonable numbers to me, maybe a little on the high end here, but that's all right. And then depreciated cost, again, tends to be really accurate. So I might kind of place it in between those three and call it 8,000. And I have support from multiple different methods in here for that $8,000. And then I can go and click done, and I can model that if I want to. And you can see what has been modeled on what's impacting what. By hovering over this little eyeball here, it shows you that lot size and GLA are what full bath was modeled on. If I hover over GLA, it says it was only modeled on lot size. And and this one has nothing, so this one wasn't modeled on anything. It didn't actually have any impacted results based on modeling. But what I've done now in full bath is I have teased out the lot size and GLA impacts, which in most markets are the biggest impacting variables or co-varying variables with things. So that made my results much more accurate, especially with that big data set that previously was giving super high kind of stupid results. So be sure to choose modeling. It does really, really help in many situations. Now, one thing before I get into my last statement that I want to make in this video is you can use the lock calculations toggle switch to prevent modeling from impacting the results. So if you need to model GLA to help all the results in full bath, half bath, garage space, or whatever, but you know it's going to throw off the bedroom calculations because those are nice and looking good, then you can lock the calculations. And what that means is any future modeling from the moment you click that toggle switch will be prevented from making any changes to the results in that particular widget, in this case, bedrooms. If I lock age, that means it is modeled on lot size and GLA. These results are based on modeling lot size and GLA. But if I go and model full bath right now, it will not impact these results or these results, but it will impact everything else. Okay, so that's that. Let's go ahead and flip these back off. And then one thing I just want to show you here, I'm going to bring all the results back. We can get rid of this. What is this? Least median of squares. I'm going to get rid of that one just so it's easier to see these. So let's look at, we want to find ordinary least squares. Here it is. Ordinary least squares regression based on the neighborhood data, $17,640. Now that's still a bit too high, but keep in mind that before modeling, do you remember what that was? That was down here in Excel, $68,000. So teasing out the lot size and GLA brought us from $68,000 down to 17,600. So that those two made a huge impact. Now, if I went and also modeled swimming pool and garage spaces, that might also help bring it down more. I know this video got long, but I just wanted to explain to you so you can feel comfortable in using the tool that the math is all right and you can match it up to Excel. And one thing I want to say for those of you that are still watching, since I know this did get long, is when you go, before you do any modeling, you should be able to go and verify this number matches exactly the number that you see in Synapse. However, keep in mind that Synapse also takes into account transactional adjustments first. So if the numbers don't match up exactly, that's probably why. You can turn off transactional adjustments and then the numbers will match up for sure. But if you are using transactional adjustments, which I definitely encourage you to do, because it's the more accurate way to handle things, then the number won't be exactly what is in Excel. It'll be close, but not exactly. But just because you're accounting for things that are not based on a property feature, they're based on the transaction, like ownership, what type of financing there was, seller concessions, market conditions, that kind of thing. So those are all handled by Synapse up front before we get into all this. Okay, that's it. I did talk a long time, as I usually do. Hopefully this was helpful though, and let us know. If not, feel free to leave a comment down below. And I may have referenced other videos in this video, so if so, I will have a link to those other videos in here if you want to go check those out. All right, thanks everybody for watching.